Welcome to our panel entitled Fashion and Beauty and Black Girls, Leadership and Making It in the Business, with Monica Peavy, who is the Group Director for Learning, Fragrance, and Beauty at Chanel, and Monique Davis, Vice President for Local and Cultural Innovation at Estée Lauder, on what it means to create pipelines for Black girls and gender-expansive youth in the fashion and beauty industries, and what role and responsibility these industries can have in efforts to support Black women, girls, and femmes more broadly. I am Monique Morris, President and CEO of G4GC, and I will be moderating today. So we have two Moniques and a Monica, and luckily I'm the moderator, so you can tell us apart. Monique and Monica, welcome. I'd like to get us started by saying that, while Black girls and young women have historically been an afterthought in mainstream beauty and marketing, they have often played a critical role in driving inspiration for fashion and beauty industries for decades. I always say that I'm grateful to Naomi Campbell and that she was such a great, successful model because it provided me with quality options for makeup that matched my skin tone. But the truth is that, Black girls are very present, Black young women are very present in the cultivation of beauty and fashion. And just as there are more young Black women in front of the camera, there are also more behind the scenes. So the broader question that we'll address is how can these industries support Black girls' power as entrepreneurs and consumers? But before we do that, I wanted to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about your company, the company you work for, and what your role is there. So Monique, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here today and having this conversation. I have been in the beauty industry for almost 20 years, which is so hard to believe. I originally started my career right out of college. I actually joined the Estée Lauder Companies, which is where I am today. And at Estée Lauder Companies, we have a wonderful program called the Presidential Associate Program for recent college grads or MBA grads who have an opportunity to join the organization and rotate throughout the number of brands that we have at the company. Many people may not be aware, but Estée Lauder Companies actually owns over 25 prestige beauty brands. So some of the brands that I'm sure you all know and love would include MAC Cosmetics, Bobbi Brown, Clinique, Tom Ford, Jo Malone for scents and candles, and many other brands. So I started as a presidential associate. I had an opportunity to work on Bobbi Brown, then rotate to Aveda, and then finally landed at Clinique in global marketing. So after my time at Clinique, I'll fast forward a few years. I did go back and get my master's degree in integrated marketing communications from Northwestern University. And I actually rejoined the company just 3 years ago in my current role, which is on the local and cultural innovation team at Estée Lauder. So what does that mean exactly? I feel so honored because in my role, I have an opportunity to work across all of our brands to make sure that we have the right products, the right claims, the right communication for women of color around the world. So Monique, as you mentioned, growing up as a young girl, just like you, I looked to muses like Naomi Campbell, Beverly Johnson, Chanel Iman, even to see how they were applying makeup, what the looks were, how they looked on them. But then I thought, how can we ensure that Black consumers have an opportunity to see themselves represented in beauty brands? And I really wanted to be a part of that. As a lifelong marketer for my career, I have often worked on cultivating brands, launching new products, but in this role, I get to partner with our brands at Estée Lauder Companies to make sure that we are getting it right for women of color. So it is a role that I am very proud and honored to have.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Monica?
Hi, excuse me. Thank you for having me. So my tenure in beauty is not quite as extensive as Monique's. I've been at Chanel for almost about 3.5 years now. And so my perspective in thinking about this conversation was thinking about someone being newer to the space. My role at Chanel is that I'm director of learning. I sit on our fragrance and beauty education team. So we focus on skincare, makeup, and fragrance. mostly. So I think in thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I thought back to when I was a little girl and what I saw around me. And I couldn't help but think about like Fashion Fair and Jet Magazine and Ebony and Essence and all of those things that you see as a little girl. But there was a very specific place where I saw them, right? It was there and kind of only there. And I also grew up as a child dancing. And I remember that I didn't have tights. I didn't have, the makeup when we were performing was always some strange color. And so I was just thinking a lot about that as I was thinking about this conversation and thinking about in the 3.5 years that I have been in this industry, what I've seen that has changed, but thinking about way back, what it was like to just say like, there's not many things in front of me that look like me, and how can we make changes so that little girls won't necessarily look around themselves the way that I did when I was a child and say, where am I represented in this space?
I love that you bring in the vision of you as a girl, right? Because yes, we could locate ourselves, but they were, as you mentioned, in very specific places. And we craved, the time that we could see the Jet magazine, and we loved going to Essence to see, ourselves throughout the entire magazine. And for some, that provided enough for them to know that this was going to be the industry for them, right? Were you that girl? Did you think that did you always imagine yourself in this industry, working in this industry?
I don't think I did. But I will say, like, when I was a child, my grandmother was in the beauty industry. So for some reason she did, right? And this was like in the 80s. I mean, she saw herself there and she thrived in the industry herself. So there was something about that also made me think that it was in a place that you could be. But I think you also at that time just thought, well, that's a place that I could be, but how comfortable am I going to be? How am I going to see things around me being like me, and how hard am I going to have to fight for some things to happen?
Mm-hmm. What about you, Monique?
It's so interesting. I always thought that I would be in the beauty industry. Like Monica, I remember seeing my mom with all of her product on her dresser displayed. I think that I always had a draw or a passion for beauty and fashion. I just wasn't aware of all the career options available in this space. And when I was finishing college, all of my peers around me, all of my friends, they were applying for jobs at banks and consulting firms. And I followed suit and I applied for those companies as well, but they really weren't where my passion, lied. I didn't really see myself in those spaces. I really wanted to pursue beauty. And so I put myself out there to see what does this industry have to offer. And when you really kind of, peel back the layers, there is a whole world in the beauty industry, a whole host of different career options from all different disciplines, from the sciences to the arts even, that really is just fascinating. And we mentioned Essence. At one point in my career, I worked at Essence magazine too. I remember seeing that on the coffee table, thinking about how glamorous these women were and accomplished. And I applied for Essence and worked there as well. So I do think there's something to be said with, you have to kind of see it and so you can obtain it, but know that it's out there and then going for it, I think is another thing that I learned.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I will admit that I am not even in recovery. I am a product queen. And a lot of us are, right? Black women spend a lot of money in this industry. Black girls spend a lot of money in this industry. And I talk about that sometimes when I'm engaging with Black girls around conversations about beauty and fashion, largely because with many of the beauty products, we have to experiment. Some of the products aren't designed for us. We have to figure out which one works for our hair texture, which one works for our skin, those kind. And a lot of people experiment, but Black women and girls really experiment a lot. And it means that the conversation around beauty sometimes is more expensive for us than it might be for some of our counterparts. So when you think about that, and you think about how Black girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth are both powerful consumers in this space, but also innovators in many of these spaces, how do you think that the industry could better recognize their power and support pipelines for Black girls, femmes, and gender expansive youth to be engaged and working in the industry professionally. Who wants to take a start at that one? Monica, I'll give it to you.
Sure. Making sure I was unmuted here. I think when you said that, it made me think about influencers and how we can really bring Black girls, Black women in as influencers, so that when we are thinking about talking about a product, showing a lifestyle around a product and a narrative around a product, that we're seeing it from that perspective. And to your point, we do experiment a lot, and I think sharing those things and sharing what you've tried and what works is really powerful in getting you to the product you're looking for and something that works for you. And so I think they play a big role. And I think, you know, there's an excuse that like we can't find influencers, but we know they're there. And so I think, you know, making sure that we're finding them and putting them in the right place so that we can share messages is pretty critical.
I agree. I also, you know, it's also about where you look, right? And what you're considering to be an influencer. So that's another open question maybe that we'll get to after this one. Monique?
I agree. Black women are the ultimate influencer and have been for many generations. You know, I saw something recently, there's a trend called slugging that's making its way in social media, which is where effectively you cover your face in Vaseline and you go to sleep and then you wake up and your skin is soft and glowing. Well, Black women have been putting Vaseline on their hands, on their feet, on their face for many generations. I think it's the power of social media that then can expand that, you know, trend. We'll say trend lightly because it's something that we as a culture have been doing for many years. So while I do think that the industry can make sure that we are leveraging influencers, I also think that the industry can also make sure that we have Black women at the table in the offices, talking to marketing, working for these companies, hiring Black women who really do have their finger on the pulse. This past fall, there was a really powerful video that the retailer Sephora launched, which was an ode or a homage to Black women, Black culture, and its influence on beauty the world over. And so it made me think that Black women, we've been doing it for years. We've been trying all the shades, we created the finger waves, and I love seeing a retailer really acknowledge that. So I think that the industry can make sure that we have, from a consumer standpoint, both the influencers, but also making sure that our offices, that we are having the talent in the room and that we are talking to our talent in the retail stores as well, who have their finger on the pulse and with consumers.
What are some of the narratives that you think need to shift in order for the industries to be more receptive to the idea of not making this a campaign per se, but thinking about this as business as usual, right? We started this by saying that a lot of money is spent from this community in this industry. And so how do we talk about shifting narratives to both increase understanding about how Black girls and young women have been you know, sort of shaping the culture and keepers of the culture in a lot of ways, but also you know, sort of what that means in an extended way around accountability to them as they grow older and into this work. So the question is really about narrative shift, like what narratives keep us out and what narratives can help us join.
Yeah, I think so. What you just described, Monique, is really my role at the Estée Lauder companies, which is to make sure that our brands are aware of the influence and power of Black women, Black girls, the looks that they create, that they start, the trends that they start, but then also the power that they have with their wallets as well. I think it's not so much about economic status. I think this is about consumers that are highly engaged, that are doing it for themselves and have been for a very long time. And if a brand doesn't have a product, a shade that suits her needs, she's going to get it from someplace else or she will create it herself, which we're seeing in the rise of entrepreneurs and Black-owned brands. So companies must take notice all throughout the year, and not just at key inflection points, but throughout the year, of the power of Black girls, Black creatives, Black women, and what they contribute to the industry.
Yeah, I agree, Monique. I'm thinking about, you just talked about it, like that dollar, right? And where are people spending? How are they spending? And how can we match the narrative to the way that people are spending, and thinking about what kinds of products are for them and work for them? You also made me think about, even down to, you think about who's working at the company, like who's the chemist? When you think about beauty products, like who's testing shades, like who is there to create that narrative, so that from top to bottom, start to finish, even the narrative of a product and the lifetime of a product, what are we doing to make sure that people are there at every level, at every stopping point?
Do you have opportunities to interact at all with young people, with Black girls in this process and in your work?
We do. I've had several opportunities. The company, Estée Lauder Companies, has had several mentorship programs with girls in New York City. The Young Women's Leadership Institute is a program that we have where we can meet and interact with Black girls, which is it's a mentorship. We talk about career, we talk about a whole host of issues that are on the girls' minds, but it's also a space for them to share from a beauty perspective what they're seeing, what they're interacting with, and have their voices heard. I think that other opportunities we have are some really robust college internship programs. The company has programs with FAMU, Florida A&M University, Howard, a number of programs with Howard University, where we will work with students from the business school. We will assign them projects to do, which often are to share with us how they're interacting with beauty, how they're interacting with the industry, which has been quite influential, I think, for our brands. So it's a great way to kind of stay connected to Black youth, both Black girls as well as young men too. But it's a wonderful touch point for the brands to see and hear directly from this demographic.
Mm-hmm. What about Chanel?
Yeah, at Chanel, I think we do something similar through our volunteer community work. When we're working with young people volunteering, they always want to know about us, but we always want to know about them. So in the same way that they're asking us and they're super curious about what it's like at Chanel, we're asking them lots of questions about, what are their thoughts and how do they make decisions about what they're going to buy and use. So similar to what Monique said.
Yeah, I often think about the ways that we invite people in, right? The way we talk about and to people sometimes is so structured that it actually leaves out the opportunity for folks to see themselves as even having access to that industry. So what are some ideas that you might have about really expanding the scope and reach in order to allow more Black girls, femmes, and other folks to see themselves and to be able to reach you all in a way that might inform whether they can see themselves working in this industry in the future?
I think one opportunity that we will have, so as I mentioned, our company has a number of programs with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, which I'm very proud of. I'm a graduate of Spelman College and HBCU as well. I do think we have an opportunity, while to keep those programs going and thriving, because we've made a lot of groundwork, but we have an opportunity to reach young people, Black girls who aren't at HBCUs, that are maybe right here in our local community in New York City and the tri-state area, and let them know that we are here and that there are opportunities. Because I think the most important thing is about exposure and knowing that there are people that look like you that work in these companies, and that we want to have Black women, Black people, people of color at the table in the labs, as Monica mentioned as well. So I think it's about kind of expanding, keep going with the HBCUs, but expanding our reach.
Yeah, I agree. I think the opportunity is right where you said, Monique, and getting, physical exposure for people to just come in, look around, see what it looks like, what it feels like. And I mean, honestly, I remember interviewing at Chanel, and I was like, I can't wait to see what it feels like when I walk in there. Like, what is it going to look like? What are the people going to be like? And I think that's what everybody wonders in industries like these, when you don't necessarily see yourself represented. And so I agree about getting out to HBCUs, and we're here in New York City, so there's just so many moments that you can have around the city with young people that I think the opportunity is there for us to get them to see various parts of the company and various levels of the company and companies like ours and just the industry in general.
I think that's right. Oftentimes when people think about beauty, they forget about the host of careers in an industry and what the difference might be between industry and sector and some of the more visible components of that industry and sector that they feel sort of represents the totality of it when it's really just a small fraction of how one can be engaged in this work. When you were younger and you were thinking about your product, your go-to product, what was it?
I was thinking, oh, go ahead, Monique. I was thinking about I wasn't really, I was probably too scared to wear makeup. I was afraid of my parents. So I didn't really wear a lot of makeup until college. But that was about when like MAC was really popular, and I just was so obsessed with their browns, and it was the 90s, so that was like the moment to have your brown lip, and I wanted to just look like Nia Long. And so the chestnut MAC lipstick was my jam. Pretty much.
Monica, you took my product.
Oh no. Well, that means it really is the jam. That's it.
MAC chestnut lip liner all day long, and lip gloss as well, so your lips were nice and glassy.
I still wear MAC.
Is that MAC? Oh, I love that lip.
But I think, I asked the question because, I mean, it's a fun question to think about the product when you're young that you are drawn to, but sometimes what you're drawn to can also represent, the possibility of how you consider moving in the world, right? Beauty, is one of those things that we sort of assign it to, or we kind of relegate it to a look. But, the reality is sometimes it's so much more, and this is your world, Monique, around marketing, but it's really just around how folks see themselves and their contributions, maybe through beauty, right? And what that can open up for them in terms of confidence, what that can open up for them in terms of engagement. And as we know, Black girls have multiple side hustles around ways of earning income and also facilitating and reshaping the public consciousness around what constitutes beauty in this country. And so the more we start to see not just the influencers, but also organizations that are doing direct work with girls, a lot of the things that the influencers are picking up come from those innovators who have no platform, no public platform at all, right? They're just walking through the street and they're just going to school and they decide to add a little something or figure out what works. And, it's the style that is almost innate among Black girls and femmes that we pick up in our modern sort of popular culture and amplify it around the world. And I'm really interested in thinking about strategies. And we may not get to it today, but I'm really interested in thinking about strategies that allow for us to recognize that creativity, recognize that brilliance, and also generate more platforms for those young people to get credit for what they create, right? When we think about accountability, we think at G4GC a lot about reciprocity, and we think a lot about how we can sort of facilitate a well-being and connection between communities that allow for folks to live in their authentic space, but also to be received as, worthy of recognition. So how do you think, what do you think is the beauty industry's role in helping to elevate where, Black girls are creators of style, or where Black girls are creators of new ideas around preservation of beauty or addressing, some of the issues that, then later become assigned to other, we gave a couple of examples earlier, other communities.
Dr. Monique, you just touched on so much in there. I mean, first of all, can we just say the power of a bold lip? Who doesn't feel more confident when they love the way their lip looks, or when their skin is gleaming and healthy and radiant, and you can just walk outside and say, I'm not wearing any makeup. This is my natural skin. Who doesn't feel confident? So I love that you just tied all that up in this question. So what I think that companies can be doing more to kind of amplify what Black girls and Black femmes have kind of been contributing to the industry for years is to, one, I think give them platforms, support through funding opportunities as well, through grants, for example, and to really kind of either partner with them or help to amplify their work, their influence, or their look. And not so much to take credit for it, because I do believe in giving credit where it's due and giving people their flowers, as many Black girls and many Black femmes deserve. But I think that companies can certainly help to kind of take their look or take their message and help to spread it on a bigger scale. And whether that's through funding, whether that is through career opportunities, there's a couple of different ways that I think companies can be doing that to make sure that Black girls are credited.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with so much of Monique said, so I'll just extend it a little bit. I was thinking while you were talking also about, what is the criteria for funding, and how do we even think about that? Like, how do we extend, I guess what I'd say typical criteria for who gets funded and who doesn't, and who gets, this opportunity and who doesn't. And I feel like the change is probably somewhere deep in there too, so that funders are thinking about how they're giving money and who they're giving it to in a different way. And I mean, you did say so much in there, Monique. I was even thinking about like TikTok dances. I said I danced. And so just watching these kids come up with these amazing dances, and then someone steals them and puts them on a commercial. And it's time for them to be recognized, and for people to reach out and help support them to get recognized for their work.
So that may be the open inquiry and the place where we have to stop, or where we start, right?
Where we start.
This is where we start. Thank you so much for your thoughtful engagement today. Thank you to all our viewers for being in community with us. Tomorrow we have day 3 of Black Girl Freedom Week with none other than the Susan Taylor, and she'll be in conversation with Joanne Smith from Girls for Gender Equity. And then later tomorrow, Dr. Salamisha Tillett will also be joining. So I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to explore both the early thoughts around beauty and Black women and girls, as well as some ways in which we are shifting narrative and being more engaged in what industries consider beautiful. And so be sure to follow us on social media for announcements, and tune back in to 1 Billion for Black Girls for the continuation of Black Girl Freedom Week. Again, Monique and Monica, thank you so much for joining, and to everyone else, we'll see you tomorrow.